The transformation of the participants in my work was unexpected, and it traveled the following path. Participants first appeared in audio form only. Then they directed me in my attempt to be material for them. And then they were voices in the tower in which they were not present at the time of the exploration, because this work is a collaboration with women participants from different parts of the world. This made their participation have a greater presence, as their identities took the place of the subject matter of the piece, because they were reading in their own languages, their own family bread recipe.
Broderie anglaise is the name of the fabric of the dress I wore in this piece and in many other pieces that will come later in this research project. In 2004 to 2005, I was living in a small apartment in the Miami Biscayne Bay area when a neighbor knocked on my door one day and gave me a bag of dresses from a thrift store that were not saleable and she thought would be perfect for me. I used them for a series of self-portraits. The time passed and I lost the dresses during moving, cleanups, except for one which I felt connected from that day until now. The white broderie anglaise that makes up this dress or nightgown has connections in my memory of the dress made by my nonna for my communion. It is not the communion that is memorable. It is the fabric and the niche sewing machine with the wheel and the pedal that came with my nonna and my mother across the Atlantic Ocean and made it from the Italian Alps to Buenos Aires. The smell and the sound, the broderie anglaise in my inner world connects me to that moment and to many moments, to her home, her language, and her stories. The cookbook was El Libro de Donna Petrona, a book that has recipes of Argentinian food. My nonna was a cook, but she was an Italian immigrant in Argentina, so there were many local recipes and ingredients she didn't know. When my mother got her first paycheck as a teacher, she brought this book for her mother, my nonna. A few years ago, my mother gave it to me.
Домашний хлеб, закваска, 1 стакан цельной ржаной муки, 1 стакан теплой воды. Смешать муку с водой до консистенции густой сметаны. Густому можно регулировать дополнительной добавкой воды. Полученную массу выложить в стеклянную баночку, накрыть полотняным полотенцем. Оставить при комнатной температуре около 25 градусов на 72 часа для брожения. Каждый день массу легко перемешивать. Хорошая закваска становится немного жирной, формируется пузырь, появляется легкий кислый запах. Опара. 1 стакан закваски, 2 стакана цельной ржаной муки и полстакана цукра. Закваску добавить в муку и перемешать до густого
Esslöffel Zucker, ein Teelöffel Salz, ein Esslöffel Öl. Alle Zutaten miteinander verkneten und abgedeckt auf doppelte Größe gehen lassen. Danach nochmals gründlich kneten und eine gefettete Kassenform geben. Nochmals ca. 20 Minuten gehen lassen. Die obere Seite mit Wasser bestreichen. Danach ca. 40-50 Minuten bei 220 Grad im Backofen backen lassen. So lassen wir den schmecken.
1 столовая ложка натурального меда, 2 чайные ложки соли и полстакана теплой воды. Взяла крепкую заварку чая с бергамоном, как в рецепте с сардинским хлебом. پارچه تمیزی را
Mélanger
روی
la
آن
levure de
بگذارید و
boulanger dans
15
un peu
دقیقه
d'eau
آن را
tiède
به خود
et
رها
de
کنید.
farine
فر را روشن
dans un
کنید.
grand pot.
دما را روی 300
Mélangez la
درجه
farine
یا
et le
بالاترین
sel.
درجه ممکن بگذارید.
Ajoutez-y la levure
دیگران بهتر
diluée
است
ainsi
چندها
qu'un peu
از
d'eau
گرمای
tiède.
بالای
Peu
فر
à
برای
peu.
گرم نمودن فر
Il se peut
استفاده
que vous
کنید
n'utilisiez
و
pas
بخش
tout.
پایینی
Il se
فر
peut
را
aussi
خاموش
que vous
کنید
en
تا با
rajoutiez
این کار
légèrement.
فر به شکل تنور
Pétrissez
بخار
votre
کند.
pâte
10
jusqu'à ce
پاره از
qu'elle
خمیر
devienne
نان را
souple.
یکی با خطک
Saisissez à
نانپذیر
pleine main la
پهن
pâte
کرده و برای
et
این کار کمی
projetez-la
آرد
contre
استفاده
la
کنید
table
تا
avec
هنوز
un
به نور
craquement sec.
بچسبد.
Et
آنها
oui,
را به شکل
cela
دایره
lui
به
permet de mieux
اندازه
lever.
پهن کنید که پهنایشان
Remettez-la
کمتر
en
بیش
boule
3 میلی
et
متر شود.
recommencez à
اگر
pétrir,
نتوانستید
puis à
هم
la
مشکلی
projeter.
پیش نمی
Ceci
آید.
pendant 15
آنها را
minutes.
کمی کلفتر آماده کنید.
Déposez la pâte
آنگاه
en
به
boule dans
وسیله
un plat.
چنگال سوراخ‌هایی را
Recouvrez-la
روی
d'un
مبل
linge
درست
humide
کنید.
et laissez-la
سپس
reposer pendant
خمیر
2 heures
پهن شده
environ.
را به
Elle
آرامی
doit doubler
برداشته
de
روی
volume.
سینی فر پهن
Une
کرده
fois qu'elle
و
a
در
bien
بالاترین
levé,
جای فر
écrasez-la
بگذارید.
avec vos mains.
به دلیل نزدیکی
Formez
نان
ensuite
به
des
گرمای
petites
فر
niches de
باید
pain
مدام
ou
نان
un
را
gros
بررسی
pain,
کنید تا
puis
نان
laissez à
نسوزد.
nouveau lever pendant 1h30. Préchauffez votre four à 200 degrés et déposez-y ensuite vos petites miches de pain. Faites cuire pendant 20 à 30 minutes. Le temps de préparation est de 2 minutes. Le temps de cuisson est de 30 minutes. Les ingrédients 700 g de farine, 30 centilitres d'eau tiède, une cuillère et demie à café de sel, 2 sachets de levure sèche de boulanger.
之后呢，揉成光滑的面团，然后进行发酵。发酵2到2.5倍大小的时候，可以用手指戳一个洞。如果它不回缩的话，面团发酵就会发得很好了。发酵好的面团拉开里面，像海绵一样，
cucchiaio e mezzo
排
di
气
sale,
分割
15
成2
grammi di
份。
lievito di birra,
取一份柔软了以后呢，擀成
mezzo
厚
cucchiaio
薄
di
均
zucchero,
匀的大面
basta.
片。
Nella
这个大面
preparazione,
片呢，然后
in
上
mezzo
面要刷
bicchiere
一
d'acqua
层油，
tiepida, scioglierete del
从
lievito di
一
birra
侧
e
卷
unite
起，
il giro. In
切
questo
割成
compotto
飞线
temperate la
一字
farina
形的形状
setacciata
的
e
三
avrete
角形。
sistemato
取
forma
一
di
份
fontana e
三角
cucchiaio
形
di lavoro
的
pulito.
尖朝上，
Iniziate a
用筷
lavorare
子
l'impasto
在中
con la
间
forchetta.
压成一个花
Man
卷，
mano versate sopra un po'
全部做
d'acqua
好
nella
了，
quale
进行
avete
第二
aggiunto il
次的发
sale e
酵。
l'olio.
锅
A
中
questo
注
punto
入了
iniziate a
很多的
lavorare
水，
l'impasto con le
烧
mani
开了以
in
后，
modo
放上做
energetico
好的花卷，
per almeno
大
15
火蒸
minuti
20分钟，
finché non
关火
diventa
可以
scuro.
焖3分钟，就会看到
Formare
一个
una
成
palla
品。
e lasciatela
这个成品
riposare in
是
un
大
contenitore
香很好
infarinato
吃
e
也很
coperto
好看，
con un
好
panno
像
umido.
是蝴蝶的花卷一样。
Lontano da correnti d'aria, il pannetto dovrà lievitare per almeno 3 ore.
Receita de pão caseiro.
Dopo le prime 3
Ingredientes:
ore, prendete il pannetto,
450 ml
lavoratelo
de água morna,
ancora un po',
150 ml de óleo,
formatelo per mezz'ora,
uma xícara de café de açúcar,
220 gradi.
uma colher rasa de sopa de sal, 2 colheres de sopa de fermento para pão, 1 kg de farinha de trigo. Modo de preparo: em uma vasilha, coloque a água morna, o açúcar, o sal e o fermento. Espere fermentar por cerca de 20 minutos. Acrescenta o óleo e a farinha de trigo e sove. Divida a massa em 3 partes iguais. Se puder, cilindre a massa. Modele os pães. Aguarde crescer. Leve ao forno pré-aquecido a 180 graus para assar por 40 minutos.
For my social sculpture exploration metamorphosis, I went to the North Beach Senior Center, where I had arranged to work with a group of volunteers. It was my first exploration with human participants present during the event. I brought a roll of white fabric and my camera on a tripod. I introduced myself and had a short conversation about my practice with the group of people who were interested. I made them aware that the work that I wanted to produce with them was going to be part of my artistic research. I suggested that they play with me and my fabric and asked them what they would do with us. The total group contained about 18 people, about of whom 6 really engaged immediately and very spontaneously. They told me what to do, and with the white fabric they wrapped me and a chair up together. One of them took over the camera, and the group told her when to start recording. Once they were outside the camera view, they indicated me what to do from behind the camera. And while they were wrapping me, they were also telling me what to do. For example, they were specific that I should enter walking from the left and that they were going to wrap me. Right after, they would leave the scene and I had to unwrap myself in any way I could. After the action, all of them, including the ones who didn't directly participate, came to make comments, which I recorded. Those recordings are the sound on the byproduct video. My aim was to explore losing control of the action and letting the participants take over. Ultimately, I wanted to become material for them and to create an action in which they could make all the decisions and propose the direction of the work. These ideas would result in failure later. In this piece, the process led the participants to cluster into an assemblage and to have their own agency as they took decision over my actions, which resonates with the work of Adrian Howells, who, in It's All Allowed, the performance of Adrian Howells, states, "My insistence on the spontaneous, a flexible structure, and on non-script, improvised exchange allows for the audience participant to contribute so much of themselves and to recognize that they have agency in the piece, which can often lead to them negotiating a total change of content and development of the piece, and this is all allowed." My reality in Miami Beach was certainly different from the environment in which Adrian Howells was working in Glasgow and Edinburgh, Scotland. One of the key differences was that the institution was present at all times, and the participants' own agency was limited due to the institution policies. Sometimes the institution was directly in conflict with the participants' agency. At other times, the participants were placed in a situation where they lacked or had lost agency. The institution would not tell the participants, which in the case of the senior center are the community, what they could or could not do. Instead, the institution administrators would call me and, in the best case, could tell me, for example, you cannot take them to the beach because of insurance policies. In the worst case, they would tell me, our schedule is full, we don't have time for your activity, we have bingo time. The administrators approached me because they knew their community would not agree with them. At that point, I started to experience how detrimental the institutional bureaucracy was to my social sculpture explorations research project. Later, I would understand that agency of the assemblage includes the institution as another participant that constitutes it.
Para mí, Verónica, ha sido un día maravilloso, porque en verdad yo soñé anoche algo tan lindo y en la mañana cuando entró la muchacha vestida de rojo me salió el sueño verdad. Y yo me había puesto el vestido color de rosa y estaba como dando una representación de algo. Y al momento que te vi a ti, el corazón me dijo, ahí está tu sueño. Tú vas a estar en esta película. Me quedé boba, Verónica. Creo que estoy encantada de la vida encontrarte a ti en este bello día. Porque lo hiciste lindo, saliste como un gusanito envuelta en esa sábana. Y yo digo, ay Dios mío, qué belleza. Así espero que si tú me necesitas a mí, espero encantada
Muchas gracias, Isabel. Espera. Muchas gracias, Isabel.
Y el elemento vivo de esta idea. Como muchos de ustedes identificaron, hemos puesto a un ser humano en un conflicto con el tiempo.
In Imperfect Destruction, I work with Eileen, Camila, and Carolina, all high school students from Miami Beach High. I met them through the education department at the Art Center South Florida. I made a request to the education department to work with the students from the internship program, and Eileen, Camila, and Carolina were the ones interested. We worked together every other Saturday for about 2 to 6 hours for 3 months, and between February and April 2016, we made 6 social sculpture explorations. The first time they came, I suggested to them that they could choose anything they found in my studio to work with, including my sculptures. They decided to destroy one of my sculptures using my tools. After the social sculpture exploration, we discussed the experience and they gave me some instructions for editing the footage. All the discussions were recorded, and they also suggested that I added another layer of this on the sound. I edited this byproduct video with them working with me as I was editing. Most of the decisions in the edit were taken by them. Camila told me to use 2 vertical images. They also told me when to use slow motion in some parts in one or the other of the vertical images, as well as when to move from black and white to color or vice versa. They were commenting how they felt strange somehow. They described themselves as having feelings of killing something. And Eileen looked for the soundtrack of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. They instructed me to slow down Hitchcock's soundtrack as well and use it as one of the sound layers. I followed all their suggestions. During that period, the camera assemblage, the cluster of the students, my studio material, objects, the art center, the camera, the computer, and myself had already an established agency. But I wasn't aware of this until later when I worked with my mother. This piece resonates with the action itself of the destruction of the sculpture, also the derive. In the sometimes chaotic ways they choose to destroy it, for example, hammering movements with a saw or sewing with a pair of scissors. After the exploration, during the dialogue, reason manifests through decisions in relation to editing, choosing images and sounds. These are elements of rationality individuality and structure, while the action that was in nature impulsive, unreasonable, and non-questionable manifested during the exploration. The sum of these actions, one after another, created this piece with no plot or plan, but rather a mirage. When I finished the second body of work, Participatory, after a series of impossible destructions and failures, I concluded that working in institutions were in contradiction to the social sculpture I was exploring. Even though there were several explorations that brought about transformation and revealed emergent properties from the participants, I decided to look for different settings. I needed a more intimate setting, an experience of one-to-one work.